And Kelly, you have been listening to everything. Any surprises here? It doesn't really seem like anything that is out of character from now these two new candidates running for this seat.
No, it sounds they're very much on message and consistent with what they've been saying through their primary campaign. And I think it's interesting, Hinson thanking her Republican colleagues and predecessors and President Trump, I think is a good indicator that she is going to keep that message going into the general election with hoping to win the Trump supporters from the previous election cycle and hope that they're still Trump supporters despite his decreasing approval rating now. But there's a lot of time before November, so that could change as well.
Kelly, we want to shift to ask you a couple questions about the governor's race, because obviously we're starting to see it come down somewhat between the numbers that we're seeing come in between Lane and Feenstra. What do you make of the race so far and what we're seeing in terms of this early data coming in? And just kind of what's your analysis on this race?
I'll say I'm honestly not that surprised that Lane is faring so well. I think you all had reported on a poll a couple days ago that put him slightly ahead of Feenstra, but I mean, pretty much a toss-up. Lane has spent a lot of money and done a lot of advertising in the state, and I think his name recognition and his profile has raised significantly in the past few months. He's really campaigned on a message similar to President Trump, a lot of talk about immigration and keeping jobs in Iowa and for Iowans. And I think that's a message that's resonating well as we talk about affordability and wage earnings. Feenstra was quieter. I think that there was an assumption that he was the front runner, so he chose not to compete in the debate. He hadn't been running many ads, and he did get Trump's endorsement, but it was awfully late. Early voting had already started. So I am not particularly surprised that this is what's happening. I think the biggest thing to look for is if somebody can reach 35%. I think 35% is the number they need to not have to go to convention to determine the candidate. And that's not a good place for the party to be because that means they're pretty divided. And I think that's another indicator of something to watch come the general election. If the Republican primary voters, which is usually your base, are this divided among candidates for the governor, what does that say about their strength in really driving turnout in a general election where Rob Sand has very consolidated support, for months now from the Democratic side. But I think it'll be interesting. I think Lane, we will see more campaigning against him. There were some early reports about his links to Kansas and flying back and forth. One of the things that I've noticed in studying Iowa in particular is the degree to which Iowa candidates and voters say they love an Iowa candidate, right? You're a fifth generation Iowan. You've had this farm for 3 generations, and that is a big campaign point. I imagine that if it is Lane versus Sand, that will be one of the comparisons. Is Sand will probably try to say he's more Iowan than Lane, and that will be a messaging battle that will play out. But I mean, it's still possible for Feenstra to win, but I think it doesn't say good things for his campaign so far that he's trailing this much when he started with being a front runner and having the highest name recognition.
Can you talk a little bit about the convention, the possibility of a convention, and who has the advantage there? Because the voting there obviously looks a lot different than it does in a primary election.
Yeah, so when they go to convention, it would, I think it's June 13th, so it's just a couple weeks away. And then you have each county, each precinct putting in their votes for the candidate. And those, much like a presidential caucus or a nominating convention for the president, people will go and cast their votes for whichever candidate they think represents their constituency. I would say that I'm not sure the last time that the Republicans have had one of these, especially for a governor. So I don't have the historical reference to say how it's gone in the past. I think generally more establishment-friendly candidates, people who have greater connections to the party, are going to fare better in those situations. But I think the other factor that those convention delegates are going to want to look at is who has the best chance of winning a general election. And Feenstra's kind of weak performance doesn't bode well. And I think Lane's fundraising might bode well. So anything could happen at that point, and no candidate wants it to get there because that just indicates we're not unified around a candidate.
Well, Kelly, I'm glad that you brought up fundraising. I wanted to ask you about Feenstra started off as the fundraising frontrunner. He ended up with about $5 million total, but we really saw in the last 2 quarters Zach Lane pull ahead of him when it comes to fundraising. Of course, he in total raised about $3.1 million. What does that tell you, that kind of flip-flop in fundraising?
I mean, fundraising is a good indicator of support, particularly big support into a general election. So if you're able to fundraise well in a primary and get that early support, that helps you not only plant seeds for a general election, but that can indicate to a candidate that you have longer term support. So if your party if you are gaining the support and the most dollars for your party in a primary, then you can bank on more support in a general election in most cases. So it has somewhat of a bandwagon of effect or a snowball effect. Raising money begets more votes. So it certainly is a positive for Lane. But Feenstra, he has the name recognition and he has the experience representing Iowa in Congress. So I think that he does have donors. I'd be curious to know how much he was trying to fundraise at this point and, what their strategy was, if it was just neglect and thinking that they would be the candidate to win the primary, or if that's a sign that maybe there's weaker amount of support.